Hello, and welcome to Life Diaries, a space where the pages of life open up, one story at a time. These are tales written by experience, spoken from the heart. Take a moment for yourself, and let's begin. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, filling the room with a soft glow. The day promised to be clear for the first time in a week. Eleanor Vance lingered in bed, opened her eyes, and a faint smile touched her lips. She turned her head to wake Robert, but her husband's place beside her was empty. From the kitchen came the gentle, inviting aroma of morning coffee. Only in the morning does coffee give off such a wonderful, unique scent. Robert was perched on a small sofa, engrossed in reading. Eleanor Vance's anxiety had a valid reason. Today they were expecting their son, and not just him. Their son's call had announced his imminent arrival not alone, but with a companion. The parents learned for the first time that their son, it turned out, had a sweetheart. But Nick said it wasn't just a girlfriend, but a fiancé. Their relationship was very serious. This came as a complete surprise to the parents. They never expected their son to want to tie the knot so early. Only 21 years old. However, they didn't object or try to dissuade him. After all, they themselves had married in their 5th year of university. Nick called again, saying that he and Carla were already on their way and would be in the city by 5 in the afternoon. Eleanor Vance had booked a table at a restaurant in advance. At first, she intended to fuss over the stove herself, but after thinking it over, she decided that the occasion was significant, and they could afford dinner at a restaurant. Their family was of modest means. They weren't poor, but they didn't allow extravagance either. In recent years, a considerable portion of their funds had gone towards Nick's tuition. Besides that, the parents were saving for an apartment for their son. "The children will arrive by 5. Will you meet them?" Eleanor asked her husband. "I need to get ready, otherwise I won't manage." "Of course I'll meet them. Don't be so anxious, it's not the Queen of England visiting." Robert tried to calm his wife's excitement. However, Eleanor Vance couldn't shake off the anxiety. She was tormented by the unknown. How would they receive their son's fiancé? It seemed there was no reason to worry, but the unease, for some unknown reason, only grew stronger. Around 3 in the afternoon, Eleanor Vance called the restaurant to confirm the dinner details. Placing the receiver on the table and looking at her reflection in the mirror, she fell into contemplation about the fleeting nature of life. It seemed only recently Nicky was learning to walk, then he went to 1st grade, and now she was expecting him to visit with a fiancé. And it was quite possible that this girl would become his lawful wife. Then children would be born. Her grandchildren. "Grandchildren," she said aloud. "What grandchildren? I'm only 43. She was horrified by this thought. I could theoretically still become a mother, and here I'm suddenly a grandmother. She was torn from these thoughts by a sharp phone call. It was Nick again. "Son? Hello, this is not your son. This is an ambulance doctor. We are currently taking your son to the hospital. The minibus he was in was involved in a road traffic accident." A strange male voice said on the phone. Eleanor Vance froze, understanding nothing. What accident? Who was taking whom where? What nonsense! She had just spoken to Nick an hour ago, and everything was fine. "Madam, can you hear me?" The voice sounded again. "I apologize. We are taking your son to the 5th City Hospital. Can you come?" "Who are you?" Her brain refused to process what was happening. "Where is my Nick?" "I understand your state, but now you need to pull yourself together and come to the 5th City Hospital. The young man may need a blood transfusion." "Hear me, for God's sake," the voice pleaded. "Yes, we'll be right there," Eleanor said as if in a daze and hung up. She looked at her reflection, and it seemed to her as if she had aged 10 years no less. Her husband entered the room. "Who are you talking to?" Nick called again. "He must miss you a lot." "Well, you'll meet soon. Then you can talk your fill." Robert Vance smiled and only then noticed that his wife was in some kind of stupor. "Robert, we need to go to the 5th hospital immediately. They're taking him there," Eleanor whispered barely audibly. "Who are they taking to the hospital?" "Nick," Eleanor replied just as quietly. "Why to the hospital?" Robert couldn't understand anything. "Accident," was all Eleanor could utter, and suddenly jumped up from the chair, fussing around the room. She snatched things from the wardrobe, scattering them on the floor. "Eleanor, wait, please, calm down. I don't understand anything. What happened?" "He'll need a blood transfusion." She suddenly froze in the middle of the room. "That means it's bad, right?" Eleanor looked pleadingly at her husband. More than anything in the world, she wanted to hear right now that no, it wasn't bad. It was just necessary, or something like that. But Robert was silent. His face changed sharply. He walked up to his wife, hugged her tightly, and said softly, "Pull yourself together. Now more than ever, you need to gather your strength. To the hospital. We must find out what's wrong with Nick. Please, compose yourself." Eleanor looked at her husband and meekly went to get dressed. Chaos reigned in the emergency room, defying comprehension. Many people, shouts, gurneys with injured, someone crying. Medical staff rushed back and forth. Eleanor held tightly onto her husband's hand, afraid of losing consciousness. "Do you see Nick anywhere?" she asked Robert. "No, I don't. We need to ask the nurse. She's sure to know." Robert resolutely headed towards a nurse who was trying to explain something to a crying woman. "Excuse me, miss. We were called and informed that our son was brought here. Can we inquire about his condition?" "Is he from the accident?" the nurse clarified. "Yes." "Then wait. The doctor will come out shortly and call you." Robert returned to Eleanor, relaying that they would be called soon. But about half an hour passed, and the doctor still didn't appear. Robert was about to approach the nurse again when suddenly a doctor appeared from somewhere and asked loudly, "Is Nevri here?" "Yes, that's us," Robert exclaimed, pulling Eleanor towards the doctor. "Please come to my office," the doctor invited, walking quickly down the corridor. They entered the office. Robert seated Eleanor on a chair, and he sat on the couch. "Doctor, tell us, what's wrong with Nick?" Robert asked. "Frankly, the situation is difficult. Your son was sitting in the front seat of the minibus. He was hit very hard. Fracture of the right clavicle, 2 right ribs, a crack in the right tibia. But these are, in essence, minor things." The doctor paused, looking questioningly at Eleanor. "Is your wife in a state to process information?" "Speak, she's in shock." "The main problem is a skull base fracture and concussion. We've just sent the young man for an MRI. We'll see what's wrong with the brain. The greatest danger is possible hematomas." "What should we do? Can we help in any way now? Perhaps you need money. Tell us, we'll find any amount." "No, nothing is needed yet. The only thing you can and must do now is pray. The rest is our concern." "I understand. We will wait for news," Robert said quietly. He looked at the doctor and added, "Please save him. We are doing everything possible, believe me." "And Carla?" Eleanor suddenly remembered. There was a girl with him, Carla, his fiancée. What about her? The doctor looked at Robert, then at Eleanor. "I don't know about any Carla. You need to check with the nurse." Robert pulled Eleanor towards the office door. Eleanor could barely drag her feet. A passing nurse offered to give her a sedative injection. "Yes, please give her one. Maybe she'll come to herself a little," Robert agreed. After the injection, Eleanor did indeed come to herself a little. "Robert, did the doctor say when there would be any results?" she asked her husband. "They said to wait. We need to find out about Carla." Yes, right. The girl probably also got hurt, and we need to inform her parents. Robert agreed. He approached the nurse to inquire about the girl's condition. I'm sorry, but the girl died. She was the only one who died in this accident. I'm sorry, the nurse said and walked away from Robert. She looked as if she herself was to blame for the girl's death. Robert was completely taken aback. He didn't know how to tell Eleanor. She was just starting to recover from the shock. He approached the nurse again. Excuse me, do you know where they took her? She must have had a phone with her. We need to somehow inform her parents. Don't worry, the police will inform them. Yes, of course. Robert returned to Eleanor, who was talking to another woman at that moment. That woman's husband had been in the same minibus and was also injured, but not as severely. Did you find out about Carla? Eleanor turned to her approaching husband. Robert shook his head negatively. How? Was she brought to this hospital? Robert looked at his wife, not daring to tell the truth. No, they took her to the 9th. The injured were divided, some here, others to the 9th, the woman said. Robert breathed a sigh of relief. He would tell Eleanor about Carla, but not now. Closer to 10 in the evening, the doctor came out again and called Robert. Robert didn't like his appearance. He understood that the doctor wouldn't have anything good to report now. I have bad news, the doctor began. Robert looked at the doctor's badge, trying to read his name in patronymic. The letters blurred before his eyes. He couldn't focus. Doctor, please, tell me what's wrong with my son. Waiting and uncertainty are the worst. He's alive. Yes, he's alive. But he has a very serious head injury. And what can be done? Is it treatable? You see, we can't do anything right now. The situation is very atypical. Surgery is risky. He might not survive it. The only thing we can do now is support his life functions. How long do we wait? A couple of days minimum. Then we'll monitor the dynamics. And what should we do? Go home? They won't let you see him anyway right now. Try to calm your wife. She needs rest. And come back tomorrow around 11. There's no point coming earlier. All right, I understand. Thank you. Robert had a hard time persuading Eleanor to go home. She absolutely refused. What if he gets worse and we're not here? Listen, we can't help him. The doctors are there. They're controlling the situation. And you need to rest. At least a little. Please don't resist. Let's go home. We'll come back here tomorrow, the doctor said around 11. 3 agonizing weeks passed. During this time, the situation hadn't cleared up. Nick remained in a serious condition, in an induced coma. Eleanor Vance was deeply affected by the news of Carla's death. She couldn't imagine how she would tell her son when he came to. Today, Eleanor arrived at the hospital to see her son only by lunchtime. She had been urgently called to work. By profession, she was a designer and worked in a small firm. She had asked her boss for a month's unscheduled leave. But the situation demanded it. For some reason, Eleanor was sure that Nick would recover very soon, and then he would need his mother's help and constant care. But Nick's treating physician, Dr. Stephen Miller, merely shrugged, saying they had to wait longer. The parents didn't understand what exactly they were waiting for. Their son simply lay in the hospital, and it seemed no one was doing anything for him. Eleanor Vance resolutely knocked on Dr. Miller's office door. "May I come in?" she asked, opening the door slightly. "Yes, come in, of course." The doctor got up from his desk, sat on the sofa, inviting Eleanor Vance to sit beside him. "We need to talk, Dr. Miller. Tell me honestly, what should we do? What are Nick's prospects? We can't just sit idly by and wait. You must understand me." "I understand, but I can't offer anything yet. We're not in Moscow, unfortunately. No one will allow your son to be transported such a long distance in this condition. I understand that, but how long do we wait? And most importantly, for what? Does my son have prospects of coming out of this state in the near future? Eleanor Vance, I cannot guarantee or promise you anything. You must understand, medicine is a precise science, but there is also room for inexplicable things, for a miracle, if you will. And I believe in this miracle, because with medical methods, we cannot do anything. Can I see him? Of course you can. Why do you ask? Eleanor Vance left the office and headed to her son's room. Nick lay on the bed in the same position as yesterday, and a week ago. Eleanor sat down beside him, took her son's hand. Scenes from the past swam before her eyes. Little Nicky, how they went to the dolphinarium, and he swam with dolphins. How he won swimming competitions and took first place in the region. She wanted to cry so badly, but there were no more tears. In these 3 most terrible weeks of her life, she had cried out everything she could. And at that moment, Eleanor was seized by a wild despair that was impossible to bear. Her hands trembled, her legs felt like cotton, dark circles swam before her eyes. It seemed to her that in a little while longer, she would lose consciousness. Eleanor jumped up from the chair, nearly falling, but managed to grab the edge of the bed and sank back onto the chair. Something must be done, flashed through her mind. But what? The unhappy mother didn't know and didn't understand whom to turn to or where to run. Leaving the hospital grounds, she slowly walked towards home. She suddenly had an unbearable craving for coffee, the aroma of which drifted down the street from the nearest coffee shop. She resolutely turned into it. Upon entering, Eleanor saw that all the tables were occupied by couples and was disappointed. Just as she was leaving the cafe, she noticed a solitary man sitting at a table in the far corner. I won't bother him too much if I drink my coffee in 10 minutes and leave, Eleanor thought, and confidently headed towards the table. Excuse me, is this seat taken? May I sit at your table? I'll only be a few minutes. I'll just have a cup of coffee and go, she addressed the man, who was intently studying some papers. The man turned and nearly dropped the documents in surprise. Eleanor! Eleanor looked at the man uncomprehendingly. How does he know me? Flashed through her mind. Yes. Excuse me, do we know each other? Eleanor clarified. Eleanor, don't you recognize me? The man smiled. Eleanor began to examine the man carefully. He looked about 40 or 45, wore solid, expensive glasses, had thick, dark hair with threads of gray showing through. He was dressed expensively, very expensively. Among her acquaintances and friends, there was no one of such wealth. Perhaps a former client? Eleanor thought and said aloud, I'm sorry, no. Did you do a design project with us? No. The man smiled, and Eleanor immediately appreciated his perfect white teeth. Do sit down, please. Sit down. Eleanor sat down on the chair, bewildered. She felt a little awkward that she didn't recognize the person sitting in front of her. So, how do you know me after all? We were at the same university, only I was a year ahead. Paul Harrison. Don't you remember? Paul? To say that Eleanor was surprised was an understatement. I would never have recognized you, honestly. Perhaps I've changed. Hopefully for the better. Paul smiled. Of course. I'm very glad to see you. And how did you end up in our neck of the woods? Didn't you transfer and leave? Yes, I left. I came to your city on business. I decided to walk around familiar places, have a fragrant coffee, sit, remember the past, and look over some documents at the same time. And then this meeting. Fate, I guess. Incredible positive energy emanated from him. Even despite her depressed state, Eleanor felt it. But her mood didn't escape Paul's notice. Did something happen? You seem very upset. Oh, Paul, better not ask. And unexpectedly, Eleanor suddenly burst into loud, bitter tears. Can I help in any way? The old friend asked. No, Paul, no one can help me now. Except perhaps higher powers. Such a thing has happened to me. And Eleanor recounted the events of the past month to Paul. For some reason, it was very easy for her to talk to him. She even stopped crying and was able to speak completely calmly. It was strange. Eleanor, unaccustomed to opening her soul to strangers, was telling about her misfortune to, in essence, a stranger. Yes, they had studied together once, perhaps even been friends, but so many years had passed, so many, that it seemed it was in a past life. And when meeting such acquaintances, people usually don't talk about their problems, but try to get away with polite phrases and questions. Paul listened very attentively, never interrupting her story. And only when Eleanor finished speaking did he ask a completely unexpected question. Eleanor, does Nick have a father? Eleanor looked at Paul in surprise. Yes, of course. Why? Do you live together? Paul continued to ask strange questions. Yes, we're married. Why are you asking? It just always seemed to me that a father should fight for his child until the very end. And where is your husband? Why are you walking around the city alone in such a state? I noticed how upset you were right away. He's at work, Eleanor answered sadly and quietly. She had nothing more to say. It was unbearably painful for her at that moment. She herself had asked herself the same questions many times and was sure that Robert would help find a way out. But he had somehow withdrawn, said he couldn't do anything. She felt ashamed. Ashamed to say that in 23 years of marriage, her husband had never made an independent decision, never shown initiative. Eleanor had always done, decided, and obtained everything. And she was very tired of it. For the first time after the wedding, she had hoped that Robert would change, that he was just still young. But time passed, Nick was born, and for several years Eleanor didn't pay any attention to her husband's indecisiveness and weakness. But then these qualities began to manifest themselves more and more clearly in everyday life. They argued about it. Eleanor tried to influence her husband, but it didn't yield results, and she simply resigned herself. But now was precisely the moment when his indecisiveness and unwillingness to act were simply driving her crazy. And Eleanor understood that she would have to do everything herself again. Otherwise, no one would save Nick. Eleanor, don't be upset. I think your Nick will definitely recover. Where did you say this wonderful Elias lives? Eleanor named the village. I just don't know yet which region it's in, but I should get a call tonight telling me how to get there. All right, calm down. We won't wait until evening, Paul said confidently, pulled out his phone and said into the receiver, George, please find out which region the village of is in, and call me back in a couple of minutes. Paul's phone rang, and a certain George provided all the necessary information. Eleanor looked at Paul in astonishment. Tell me, can you get time off work for a couple of days by phone, so we don't waste time and leave right now? I'm on leave starting today, she said slowly and quietly. She looked at her old acquaintance with such surprise that it took her breath away. But I need to pack at least some things for the trip. What things? We'll buy everything we need on the way, Paul said clearly and businesslike. Look, if we leave right now, we'll be there by midnight. Although, no, not right now. So, first he put on a show, and now he's backing down, she thought sadly. Paul, I understand everything. You have your own business. I'll go by train or bus myself. There's transportation. You've already helped me by finding out the region. Thank you. No, not right now, because we haven't finished our coffee. Paul smiled. You'll finish it. You're something else, she smiled. What about your business? Eleanor, my dear, my business can wait. I have people to work. The main thing is to keep my finger on the pulse. In this case, be reachable. Don't worry about that. Finish your coffee calmly, and we'll go. They finished their coffee and left the coffee shop. Paul walked over to a car, and Eleanor was surprised again. A luxurious business-class car stood before her. Even if we sell our apartment and car, we won't have enough money, Eleanor thought for some reason. Please. Paul opened the front passenger door, inviting Eleanor to get in. Thank you. You have a very beautiful car. Yes, I like it too. He smiled back. Wait, don't you need to call anyone and let them know you've left? No, I don't. What about parents? Dad died a year ago, and Mom followed soon after. So besides my husband and son, I have no close relatives. Although you can't exactly call my husband close, especially now. I'm sorry. Please accept my condolences on your parents. It's all right. I've already gotten through that. Although it's hard, of course, without parental support. I understand you. My parents also passed away one after another 7 years ago. First Mom, and then Dad 6 months later. It's very difficult. Yes, Eleanor said, looking somewhere into the distance. They drove in silence for about 10 minutes. Each was thinking their own thoughts. But Eleanor was sure that Paul, just like her, was remembering his parents now. That wound never heals. Around 11 o'clock, they drove into a town near the necessary village. Paul suggested stopping in town for the night, as driving to the village at such an hour would be unreasonable. They found a small, cozy hotel and took 2 adjacent single rooms. Are you hungry? Paul asked. I don't even know. Sort of. Yes, but not really. Let's have a glass of wine and some salad and go to bed. We need to get up early tomorrow. Yes, I agree. Wine will relax me and help me sleep. Then go up to your room. I'll be there soon. Paul arrived about 40 minutes later. Eleanor had managed to shower and change into a hotel robe. I've found out everything about this Elias. The administrator is a very talkative girl. She explained everything to me in detail. You need to go to him at 8 o'clock. He doesn't receive earlier. But you have to get to him before sunset. He doesn't receive after that either. So I suggest going to the village by 7. There will clearly be a queue there. People come to him not only from all over the country, but also from neighboring countries. It's not guaranteed that we'll get to see him tomorrow on the first try. The administrator said that some people wait for their turn for 3 or 4 days. Wow, I'll hope that we haven't come for nothing after all, and that he really can help Nick. There was a knock at the door, and a young man of about 19 entered the room carrying a tray of various dishes. He carefully placed the tray on the table, wished them a pleasant meal and rest, and left. After a small dinner, the conversation resumed, but Eleanor lay down and looked at her phone. 0:05. 1 in the morning. Robert hadn't called once. Can he really be so indifferent? She was almost asleep when she heard a message notification in a messenger app. Eleanor picked up her phone and read, "Do you have a conscience? Did you see what time it is? Is this your revenge?" She wanted to reply, but then she thought about it, muted her phone, turned over, and fell asleep. At 6 in the morning, they drove up to Elias's house. He came out literally a minute later, carrying a small case in his hand. Approaching the car, the healer greeted them and briskly got into the back seat. "Perhaps you'd like to sit in the front?" "I can offer you my seat," Eleanor suggested. "Thank you, no need. I'm not used to taking someone else's place, and this place is yours. A wife should always be next to her husband," Elias remarked. "But we're not husband and wife," Eleanor objected. "This is Elias." Paul looked at Elias, then at Eleanor, and simply smiled. He was increasingly fond of this strange little man. They arrived at the hospital where Nick was being treated around 4 in the afternoon. Fortunately, Dr. Stephen Miller was there and immediately received Eleanor in his office. "Good afternoon. I've brought this amazing person, and I insist that he examine Nick right now. Eleanor began from the doorway. Then let's go to the room, Dr. Miller said. Eleanor, Elias, and Dr. Miller entered the room. Nick lay on the bed in the same position as before. Elias immediately walked up to Nick's bed, gesturing for them to stay by the door. Approaching the young man, he first looked at him for several minutes, then took his hand and placed his own palm over it. To Eleanor, it seemed like an hour had passed, no less. In reality, it was no more than 5 minutes. "Leave me alone with the young man for about 40 minutes, Elias requested. "What are you going to do?" the doctor inquired. "Don't worry, nothing dangerous or supernatural. I just need to be alone with him. Please, I beg you." Eleanor intervened in the conversation. "Dr. Miller, let's step out. Let Elias be with my son. As a mother, I don't object." "Yes, of course. It certainly won't get any worse," the doctor agreed. Those 40 minutes were the longest of her life. It felt like an eternity had passed. The waiting was simply unbearable. It's true what they say. It's better to chase than to wait. Inaction and not understanding what was happening threw her off balance. Finally, the door to the room opened, and Elias appeared. He looked very strange. It felt as if he had aged before their eyes. Eleanor stared at the healer in astonishment. What happened in there that he changed so much? She thought. But she asked aloud, "Tell me, does he have even the slightest chance of pulling through?" Eleanor looked pleadingly at the healer. Dr. Miller also asked with hope in his voice, "Well, does the young man have a chance?" "He will be fine. I need a bed in your hospital for 3 days. Can you arrange that? Or do I need to break something myself?" he inquired of the doctor. "I think we can figure something out. Don't worry. And are you sure about your conclusion? Can he really recover?" "Not can, but will recover. He will start improving very soon." Dr. Miller went to find Elias a free bed in a room. Elias looked into Eleanor's eyes. "Why are you looking at me like that? I already said, everything will be fine. So, let's do this. You go home now, take a shower, and go to sleep. Tomorrow, please, don't come here. Your help won't be needed. But the day after tomorrow, you need to come to the hospital no later than..." He calculated something in his mind. "No later than 11. "Of course, I can come at 7. Eleanor immediately agreed. "Did I say 7? "No. Come at 9. That will be the best time." "I'll come. I'll definitely come. Thank you from the bottom of my weary soul." Eleanor had already moved away from Elias and was heading towards the exit when she suddenly heard his voice. "Soon your soul will sing, not suffer. You'll see," he said promisingly. But Eleanor didn't believe it. Paul waited patiently for Eleanor near the hospital. "Well, what did he say?" Paul asked with genuine sympathy. "He said he can help. He needs 3 days. He told me not to come to the hospital tomorrow, but to come the day after tomorrow at 9 in the morning." "My God, how will you get through these day and a half?" Paul sympathized. "Honestly, I have no idea. Are you going home now, or maybe you'll stay at the hotel and go in the morning?" Eleanor inquired. "What do you mean, go in the morning? I'm going to leave you alone in this state? Who do you take me for?" "But you've already spent so much time on me. I feel awkward," Eleanor admitted honestly. Now that was hurtful. Paul pretended to be offended. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, but..." Eleanor looked away. "Can I stay at your hotel tonight? I don't want to go home." "Of course you can. Why are you asking? I'm terribly hungry, though. Let's go quickly." Paul smiled. They got into the car and drove to the hotel. The good hotel was only a 10-minute drive from the hospital. Paul booked 2 adjacent rooms and ordered dinner to the room. "You won't object to eating in the room?" he asked Eleanor. "Can I ask a question in return?" Eleanor asked, blushing and feeling shy. "Of course you can." I'll take a shower and be in a robe. I don't have the strength to stay in this suit anymore. Of course you can. Do whatever is comfortable for you. It's fine. When Eleanor came out of the shower, the table was already set. Paul had ordered so much food that it could feed 10 people. I think I overdid it. You're just hungry. That often happens when you want to eat. Well, it's not a big deal. We'll eat the tastiest things. They talked until 2 in the morning, despite being terribly tired, not so much physically as emotionally. Eleanor didn't want to sleep at all. She felt incredibly calm and comfortable in Paul's company. They talked about silly things and recalled funny stories from their lives. Paul saw how worried Eleanor was about her son and tried his best to distract her from those thoughts. He admired the courage of this strong woman. Not every man is capable of enduring difficulties and blows of fate so steadfastly. And here, seemingly, was a weak woman. Although from his own experience, Paul knew that women were much stronger and more resilient than men, and who came up with calling them the weaker sex, he sincerely didn't understand. Eleanor fell asleep in Paul's hotel room. He felt sorry waking the woman he loved, and he carefully carried her to his bed, while he lay on the small sofa. In the morning, they drove to the hospital to see Nick. Exactly at 9, as Elias had said. Dr. Stephen Miller met them at the entrance to the ward, and seeing him, Eleanor was afraid that something had happened during that time, and immediately reproached herself for allowing herself to relax. What? What happened? She rushed to the doctor. Calm down, Eleanor Vance. Everything is fine. Even better. Nick has regained consciousness. How? He came to in these less than 2 days? Eleanor couldn't believe what she heard. Can I see my son? Does he understand where he is and what happened? Calm down, he's fine, especially his head. You can see him, he's waiting for you. Eleanor didn't walk, but flew into Nick's room. Nick was sitting on the bed, and Elias was sitting beside him on a chair. Son, Nick, darling. She began to kiss and hug him, not believing her own eyes. How are you? Can you talk? Mom, don't worry, I'm fine. I'll recover soon. Elias. Eleanor wanted to kiss Elias, but realized it wouldn't be very proper. She fell to her knees before him and began to thank him. Elias, not expecting such a turn, lifted Eleanor from the floor and seated her on a chair. Eleanor, stop! What are you doing? You're embarrassing me. I don't know how to thank you. You saved my son. Tell me, how much do I owe you? I forgot to ask about the amount. Listen to me, you need to calm down a bit. I'll go out now and leave you alone with Nick. He needs to tell you something important. And then we'll talk. Agreed? Yes, of course. Son, what do you need to tell me? Something bad, right? Mom, stop it. I told you everything's fine. Listen, just don't worry and don't be scared. When I was in a coma, Carla came to me. He saw that his mother was about to say something, didn't let her get a word out, and continued. Yes, I know she died. Don't interrupt. She asked that when you have a daughter, you name her Kathy, in memory of Carla. Her passport name is Karina. She was baptized as Catherine, you understand? Eleanor understood absolutely nothing. At one point, it even seemed to her that her son had problems with his head. Son, does your head hurt? No, Mom, my head doesn't hurt. Promise me you'll name your sister Kathy, please. It's important for her and for me. But I'm not planning on having children. I'm 43, if you recall. If you're not planning, you will, Nick calmly remarked. I don't understand anything. Oh, and one more thing. I know you're divorcing Dad. So you don't worry, I'll tell you right away. I'm not against it. I'm with you. Eleanor looked at Nick in astonishment. He loved his father and was almost always on his side. What had happened? Why such sudden changes? What was connected to this and what contributed to it? It seemed to Eleanor that she was dreaming. Nick, what about Dad? You always said you would never forgive us if we divorced. Mom, that was when I was a child. I've grown up and I evaluate many things now. I know that Dad never came to my room once while I was in a coma. I know everything he did and said. I know what you did. I saw and heard everything. Mom, I beg you, be truly happy as a woman. I won't stop communicating with my father. He is my father, whatever he may be, and he taught me a lot. But I want you to be happy, because I love you. And now I know that for sure. Eleanor was crying again. Tears streamed from her eyes. To hear such words from her own child, an adult child who had practically been on the other side, it was too emotional and touching. Eleanor Vance hugged Nick and kissed him on the cheek. Son, I love you very much. Very much. Thank you so much for those words. We'll manage. Dr. Stephen Miller entered the room and said that Nick was being taken for an MRI. The results of the examination impressed even the most experienced doctors. The hematomas that were in Nick's head had disappeared somewhere. The fractures were almost healed, and now he only needed rehabilitation without surgical intervention. Well, Elias, I've seen a lot in my life, but this... Dr. Miller turned to Elias. I don't even know how to comment on this. I only have one question. If I happen to have other medically hopeless patients in my practice, can I refer them to you? You can. I help everyone I can, Elias replied. But it's not always like this. Sometimes a person cannot recover because they themselves don't want to. Then no one can help. Eleanor stood aside, patiently waiting for them to finish talking. Elias stepped away from Dr. Miller and looked intently at the woman. Do you want to ask something? He asked, smiling. No, Eleanor lied, although she very much wanted to ask Elias about her pregnancy, which Nick had mentioned. But I think you're deceiving me. I wanted to thank you for saving my son. How much do I owe you? Elias's face changed slightly, and he shook his head reproachfully. Do you think everything is always measured by money? No, of course not. Eleanor felt awkward. She felt guilty. What did money do? Where would you take it to give to God? Well, that's different. No, it's not different. I am God's messenger, and I do His work with my own hands. He's just a little behind schedule. Elias smiled somewhat sadly. Are you sure you don't want to ask anything else? Eleanor hesitated, wondering what to do, and finally decided. Yes, I do. Tell me, am I doing the right thing by leaving my husband in the past? What do you think yourself? Or how do you feel? What do you want? I want to be happy. And what do you need for that? Or rather, who? Another man. Not your husband. You see, you know everything yourself. Why are you asking me? And one more thing. Eleanor felt like sinking through the floor. It seemed to her that at 43, asking about pregnancy was a bit late for her mother, let alone asking a stranger. But she decided, Tell me, can I still get pregnant? No, Elias said honestly and directly. Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes. I wish I hadn't asked. At least there would have been some hope. Eleanor thought disappointedly. You can't get pregnant because you are already pregnant. Elias smiled. You always get upset before hearing the full answer. Wait, how? Already? So this is Robert's child, your husband? No. This is the child of the man you came here with. Your destined one. But that was just recently, and you're already sure I'm pregnant? Eleanor was stunned. Does that happen? It happens. When people are destined to be together, they do foolish things their whole lives instead of living happily. In such a case, fate uses the slightest chance to bring such people together. Incredible, was all Eleanor could say. Thank you very much. We'll take you back home. No need. Just take me to the train station, please. I have another journey planned, now that I'm in Russia. And take care of yourself and your family. That's the most important thing in life. Paul took Elias to the station and returned to the hospital. Eleanor spoke with Dr. Stephen Miller and was surprised to hear that Nick could be discharged home at the beginning of the next week, but he would need to follow a regimen and perform a set of exercises for a speedy recovery. Eleanor went into her son's room. Nick was sitting by the window, staring into space. "Son, what's wrong?" his mother asked, frightened. "Nothing, Mom. I'm fine. I'm just sitting here thinking. Things like this happen in life. I was dying, almost died, and then I came back. If it wasn't for you..." "Where did you even find this Elias?" Eleanor told him where she had learned about him and where she had gone to bring him to the hospital. "Yeah, you know how to surprise me, Mom." "Nick, I'm going now, but I'll come back first thing in the morning tomorrow, okay? I really need to talk to someone, with Paul." "Did I say his name?" "No, but I know. Go on, of course. I'm going to sleep. I'm very tired." Nick kissed his mother goodbye and lay down in bed, and Eleanor hurried to Paul. She kept thinking about how to tell him the news and whether to tell him now. Maybe she should be sure first? What if Elias was wrong? Paul was standing near the car, talking on the phone. "George, this needs to be done urgently. I can't live like this after all." "Yes, we'll transfer." "Well, it's not a big deal. Yes, I understand there are certain difficulties. Maybe. I'll definitely talk to her." "Of course. All right. Stay in touch." Paul turned around and saw Eleanor approaching. "Hi, can you talk?" they blurted out in unison, on one breath, and laughed. "You go first," Paul offered. "I'll yield to the woman I love. It's her right." "Paul, let's not do it here. This isn't the right place at all." "Okay, then let's go. We'll eat and talk. It's not a quick conversation. It requires attention and calm." "You're scaring me." Eleanor tensed up. "Don't worry, there's nothing wrong. Everything is fine." Sitting at a table in the restaurant, Eleanor couldn't bring herself to start. Doubts about the correctness of such a decision plagued her. But Paul watched patiently and waited. "Eleanor, I am of course a patient person, and I've waited for you for over 20 years, but let's speed things up a bit. What did you want to say?" Eleanor couldn't think of anything better than to retell her conversation with Elias today. Paul looked at Eleanor and didn't understand what she was saying. "Are you telling me that I'm going to have a child? A real one?" Eleanor laughed. "Of course a real one. What else? And most likely it will be a girl. A girl, Daddy's princess." "It can't be! It can't be!" Tears streamed from Paul's eyes. Eleanor had not expected this at all. A respectable adult man burst into tears like a child. "Paul, what's wrong? Don't. You don't understand what this news means to me. I wanted a child so much. I always wanted and dreamed of a daughter. But to have one with the woman I love, I had almost lost hope. My only hope left was to be with you, to win you over, to charm you. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But that you can give me a daughter, today is the best day of my life." Eleanor was also crying now. It was very touching and tugged at her soul. Having composed himself, Paul continued. "So, I made the right decision. Now I am absolutely sure of it," he began. "Eleanor, my dear, your divorce is a matter of time. I understand perfectly that now you are only mine, and I won't give you up to anyone. But we need to solve one important question. Where will we live? What are the options?" Eleanor smiled. She already understood that Paul would try to persuade her to move to his city, and she was ready for it. "Look, we can buy a house in Jubilee Village, or a large 2-level apartment on Pushkin Street." Paul named 2 elite areas in her city. She had not expected him to be willing to move here. "Wait, are you saying you're ready to move to this city for me and abandon your business?" She couldn't believe it. "No one is going to abandon the business. We need something to live on. As for moving, I'm ready to go anywhere for you." "Paul, tell me, Is the option of staying in your city not suitable for us? It is, of course, but I just thought. Paul looked at Eleanor in surprise. Would you agree to move to my city for me? Paul, I was married and carried everything on my shoulders for over 20 years. I want to be a wife supported by her husband, to feel married, not like he's married to me. I'm ready to go anywhere with you, even to Siberia. Paul couldn't help himself, jumped up, and lifted Eleanor into his arms. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the best woman in the world, he shouted across the restaurant. And I love her, and she's going to give me a daughter. The people present in the restaurant burst into applause. Someone shouted, "Well done!" Someone else, "Congratulations!" Eleanor blushed. "Put me down! You're embarrassing me," Eleanor said quietly. "You are truly my happiness." A week later, Nick was discharged from the hospital, and the three of them moved to Paul's city. He had a large house, and there was enough space for everyone. Nick decided to transfer, finish his studies in the same city, and live with his mother and stepfather. To Eleanor's great surprise, Nick quickly got along with Paul. They often went fishing together. Eleanor had not expected her life to change so much that she would decide to become a mother for the second time, and that she would finally be supported by her husband and simply a happy woman. And even less did she expect to meet again, after so many years, the man she had been secretly in love with at university. But she would tell him about that sometime later.